My wife's son blamed me for his parents' divorce, spread lies, pushed her to choose him, and destroyed our marriage. Then his dad told the truth. He lost everything. She ended up alone, and I'm living better than ever without them. Hey Reddit, my wife's son thought I ruined his parents' marriage. His dad backed the story. My wife tried to keep the peace, and things got ugly fast. Before we get to the blow up, let me start from the beginning. I'm 38, my name's Justin, and up until a few months ago, I thought I had a solid life. Career going well, decent house in the suburbs, a wife I cared about, and yeah, a stepson. That's where things started falling apart, but I guess I need to explain how we got here first. Grace and I met 5 years ago at a mutual friend's cookout. She was 33 then, recently separated, living with her sister at the time. I remember she had this mix of confidence and tiredness, like she'd been through a lot but wasn't going to let it crush her. We hit it off right away. She was funny, easy to talk to, nothing like the people I'd been dating before. I learned about her son Ethan on our second date. He was 15 then, living mostly with her, but spending some weekends at his dad Victor's place. She told me right away there was no going back with Victor. Things had been bad for years. She said the split was messy, sure, but she was done with him long before she met me. Victor, though, told a different story. He started spreading this idea that Grace had left him for me, that I was sneaking around with her while they were still married. Total lie. When I met Grace, she was already separated. Papers filed, rings off. Didn't matter. Victor made sure everyone who'd listen thought I was the villain. Ethan heard that version too. At first, he didn't act like he hated me or anything. When I met him, he was polite but quiet, the way teenagers are when they don't know what to say. I didn't push. I figured he needed time to get used to the idea his mom was seeing someone new. The first year Grace and I were together, I made a point not to overstep. I didn't try to be his dad. I was just around. If he wanted help with something like rides to soccer practice or looking over his college essays, I was there. I showed up to a couple of his games when Grace asked. We even worked on his car together one weekend when his old Honda wouldn't start. He said thanks, was respectful enough, but I could tell there was this wall I wasn't getting through. I thought maybe it was normal teenage stuff. But then little comments started slipping out. Like when Grace and I got engaged, Ethan joked at dinner, "Guess mom doesn't waste time replacing people." Grace snapped at him for being rude, but he just shrugged and said it was a joke. It wasn't just one remark. Over the next couple years, every now and then he'd say something about guys who can't find their own wives or people who like other people's leftovers. Grace would tell him to knock it off, but it was obvious where he got it from. Victor was still in his ear, keeping that story alive. When Ethan turned 18 and went off to college, things between us were civil but cold. We weren't close, but we didn't fight either. He came home for breaks, spent most of his time in his room or out with friends. I thought maybe once he got older, he'd see things differently, like realize the divorce had nothing to do with me. Grace always said, he just needs time. I believed her. Around this time, my buddy Dante started saying things that stuck with me. I've known Dante since high school. He's one of those guys who doesn't sugarcoat anything. Owns a couple businesses, no kids, dates women half the city's jealous of. He saw the way Ethan acted at a barbecue one summer when the kid barely said 2 words to me. After Ethan left, Dante looked at me and said, "Man, you don't owe that kid your dignity. Respect goes both ways. You start letting him treat you like crap now, it's only going to get worse." And I told him it wasn't like that Ethan was just young, still mad about the divorce. Dante shook his head. He's a man now, not some little boy. You give an inch on respect, you'll be crawling before you know it. I laughed it off back then. Looking back, I should have listened harder. Because right after Ethan's first year of college, things really started to change. Not overnight, but there was this edge to him that wasn't there before. He'd come home for a weekend and barely acknowledge me. If I asked about school, I'd get one-word answers. If Grace and I made plans, he acted like I was stealing his mom from him. It was like all the bitterness Victor poured into him finally boiled over. And yeah, I kept thinking about what Dante said. Back then, I didn't realize just how bad it was going to get. We were living in Grace's former marital home. After we married, I took on most of the expenses even though the title stayed in her name. Ik starkinin. By the time Ethan started his second year of college, the attitude was getting harder to ignore. He came home for a weekend in October, and right away there was this edge to him. He walked in, said hi to his mom, gave me a nod so small I almost missed it, and then disappeared into his room. At dinner that night, he was on his phone the whole time. Grace asked about his classes and he mumbled something about them being fine. I tried making small talk, Asked if he was still dating that girl from high school, and he just said, no, without looking up. Then a few minutes later, out of nowhere, he goes, so Justin, what's it like taking another man's family? That weird at all? Grace dropped her fork. Ethan, that's enough. With Grace, that usually meant the end of it. No lecture, no follow-up, just a plea to keep the peace. He shrugged. Just asking a question. I didn't rise to it. I just said I didn't take anything from anyone. Your parents were done before I even met your mom. He smirked like he didn't believe me and went back to eating. That's how it was with him. These little digs slipped in like casual remarks, but there was always something behind them. A few weeks later, Grace told me she'd been on the phone with Victor, and apparently he'd been telling Ethan real men protect their family and how I stole everything from him. Victor had cheated on Grace, by the way. She told me that back when we first started dating. He ran around on her for years. Grace hated confrontation. Always has. She told Ethan to stop being disrespectful, but she said it like a mom asking her kid to clean his room. Soft, hoping he'd just listen because she asked nicely. He didn't. One night, I was at my friend Dante's place. He was grilling steaks, and I told him what was going on. Man, he said, flipping a steak, you need to set some boundaries. Don't let the kid run the house. You're not his punching bag. I told him Grace didn't want to push Ethan too hard. Of course she doesn't, Dante said. She's scared he'll pull away if she calls him out. So he walks all over you instead. Why wouldn't he? Nobody's stopping him. I didn't have an answer for that. The next time Ethan was home, it was Thanksgiving break. Grace wanted it to be nice. Big dinner, everyone together. She spent all day cooking. Dante came too. He's known Grace for years through me. We're all at the table. Grace bringing out the turkey. When Ethan says, hey, Mom, you remember when Dad used to carve the turkey? Back before everything got replaced? He looked straight at me when he said it. Grace closed her eyes for a second. Ethan, please stop. What? I'm just saying things change fast around here. One day it's Dad carving the turkey. Next day it's... He waved his hand at me. I put my fork down. I didn't replace anyone, Ethan. I've just been the one keeping the lights on. He leaned back in his chair. Just saying, some people move in quick when they see an opening. Grace snapped. Enough. I mean it. Ethan smirked but shut up. Dinner was awkward after that. Dante didn't say anything until later when we were outside. He lit a cigar, looked at me and said, you see what I mean? That kid thinks he runs the place. I told him I didn't want to make things worse for Grace. Dante shook his head. You're not making it worse. He is. And he's going to keep doing it until someone tells him no. Christmas break was worse. Ethan was home for 3 weeks, and it was like I didn't exist. He'd come in, talk to Grace like I wasn't standing right there, and then leave the room if I said anything. Grace tried to talk to him about it once. He told her he just didn't feel comfortable around me because of how things went down with his parents. She told me later she thought he'd grow out of it. But watching him that Christmas, acting like a guest in our house while treating me like the intruder, I knew something was coming. Ethan came home for summer break in May. Grace was excited, like always. She cleaned up his room, stocked the fridge with his favorite snacks, talked about family dinners like it was going to be some happy reunion. The first week, he was mostly out with friends. When he was home, he barely said a word to me. Grace kept telling me to give him time, but I'd been hearing that for years. One afternoon, I was working from home. I do consulting work, so most of my meetings are video calls. I was in the office downstairs, wrapping up with a client, when it started. This loud electric guitar came blaring from upstairs. No rhythm, just loud, messy noise shaking the walls. I ignored it at first, thinking he'd stop after a minute. He didn't. It got louder. I sent him a quick text. Hey, can you keep it down? On a call. No response. 5 minutes later, it was even louder. He had the amp cranked all the way up, like he was doing it on purpose. My client asked if everything was okay. I apologized, muted myself when I could. As soon as the call ended, I went upstairs. Ethan's door was half open. He was standing there with the guitar, hammering on the strings, staring right at me when I walked in. Hey, I said, calm as I could. I've got another meeting in 20 minutes. Can you turn it down until I'm done? He smirked. It's my mom's house too, you know. I can play in my room if I want. Not when people are working, I said. Just keep it down a bit. He leaned the guitar against the amp, crossed his arms. Funny, isn't it? You move into our house, take my dad's place. Now you're giving me rules? You think you're the man of the house or something? I kept my voice even. I'm asking for some respect, Ethan. That's it. He laughed. This short, sharp laugh. Respect? From me? For what? For wrecking my family? For taking my mom from my dad? You think anybody doesn't see what you did? I didn't take anything from anybody, I said. Your parents were done before I came along. You know that. Yeah, that's what Mom says, he shot back. Dad says different. Says you were always hanging around, waiting for your chance. Guess he was right. I felt my jaw tighten, but I didn't raise my voice. Believe what you want, but you're not going to stand here in this house and talk to me like that. He stepped closer, trying to stare me down. Or what? You gonna throw me out? Big man in his big house? You just married into it. You didn't build any of this. You needed my mom to give you a life. That one actually made me laugh. Kid, I make more than your mom does. I pay most of the bills here. You think I'm here for money? You don't know anything about me. He grabbed the guitar again, strummed a loud, ugly chord right in my face. Yeah, sure. You're just some perfect guy who did nothing wrong. Whole family fell apart for no reason. Must be nice living in your little fantasy world. I stepped back, kept my voice steady. Here's the deal. You want to stay here? You show some basic respect. You don't have to like me. You don't have to talk to me. But you're not going to act like this in this house. You don't like it. You can leave. His eyes narrowed. You serious? Completely, I said. Door's right there. He stared at me for a long second, like he was waiting for me to back down. I didn't. Finally, he grabbed his keys off the desk. Fine, he said. I'll go to Dad's. At least he actually cares about me. Go wherever you want, I told him. But you're not staying here if you can't be civil. He stormed out, slamming the front door so hard the windows rattled. 10 minutes later, Grace started blowing up my phone. Why is Ethan calling me crying? She texted. What happened? By the time she got home, Ethan was at Victor's place, telling everyone who would listen that I'd thrown him out for no reason, that I'd been verbally abusive, that I finally showed my true colors. Victor called Grace while I was standing right there, yelling loud enough for me to hear every word. Said he always knew I was trouble, that he should call a lawyer, that I had no right to put my hands on his son, though I hadn't touched him once. Grace looked at me like she didn't know what to believe. I told her exactly what happened, word for word. She just sat down at the table, rubbing her forehead. I need to talk to him, she said finally. Go ahead, I told her. But I'm not living like this anymore. And I meant it. The day after Ethan left for Victor's place, Grace spent hours on the phone. With Ethan. With Victor. Even with Ethan's girlfriend, Mia. She came downstairs after one call, looking exhausted. He says he'll come back, she said. But only if you admit what you did. I was at the kitchen counter, finishing some paperwork. Admit what? That you ruined his parents' marriage? She said quietly. I actually laughed. You want me to lie to make him feel better? Grace frowned. He says it's not a lie. He says Dad told him. Yeah, I know what Victor told him, I cut in. Victor's been spinning that story for years because it makes him look less like the guy who cheated on his wife and blew up his own marriage. Grace rubbed her temples. Justin, I'm not saying it's true, she said. But if you acknowledge how he feels about the divorce, say you're sorry for the hurt, it might lower the temperature. He needs something that lets him stop fighting. So I confessed to something I didn't do. So the kid who just called me a homewrecker can feel like he won't? She didn't answer right away. I stared at her. Grace, no. I'm not apologizing for something I didn't do. I didn't ruin your marriage. Victor did. You told me that yourself 100 times. She sat down across from me. I just want my son back. And I want some basic respect in my own house, I said. Not too much to ask. Over the next couple of weeks, Ethan stayed at Victor's. Grace started spending more time there too. First lunches, then 2 or 3 evenings a week. I told her, you know how this looks. She said, I'm there for Ethan, not for Victor. I said fine, but text me if you'll be past 10 and keep it to where Ethan is in the room. One night she didn't get home until after midnight. I was still up. We'd agreed on a 10 o'clock cutoff. She blew past it. Ethan didn't want me to leave, she said. Did he want you to move in too? I asked. She glared at me. Don't be dramatic. I'm not, I said. I'm asking how far this goes. Because right now, your son's holding the whole house hostage until I confess to something I didn't do. She didn't answer. Just went upstairs. The next weekend, she came back from Victor's place looking frustrated. He still won't come back if you're here, she said. Then he's not coming back, I told her. Justin, she said, like she couldn't believe I wasn't giving in. He's my son. And I'm your husband, I said. At least I thought I was. She didn't say anything to that. For the record, I don't think she was cheating. It looked wrong even if it wasn't. That night, I sat at the table, staring at the stack of papers Dante had sent me earlier in the day. Separation forms. I hadn't asked him for them, but he sent them anyway, along with a note. Don't wait around to be the bad guy in someone else's story forever. I looked at the papers for a long time. The next morning, Grace was in the kitchen when I came downstairs. "I'm filing these," I said, putting the envelope on the counter. "I warned you how this looked. I won't be the husband who waits at home while you spend nights at your ex's." She looked at it like she didn't understand. "What is that?" "Separation," I said. "I'm not living in a house where I'm treated like the villain because Victor can't own his mistakes, and your son wants someone to blame." "You're giving up?" she asked. "No," I said. "I'm done being disrespected in my own home. I'm done watching you run over there every time he snaps his fingers while I sit here like the problem." Grace looked at the envelope, then at me. "This isn't what I wanted." "It's what's happening," I said. "He made his choice. Now I'm making mine." For a long time, neither of us said anything. She finally asked, "What happens now?" "You figure out what you want," I said. "But I'm not staying here while you and your son treat me like some stranger who wrecked your lives." I didn't. And I'm not going to pretend I did just to keep the peace. I'll keep paying what I've been paying through month's end while we unwind this. She didn't try to stop me when I picked up the envelope and walked out the door. "It's me, Seer." 2 weeks later, Grace's sister hosted a birthday party for their dad. Big backyard thing, lots of relatives. Even Victor showed up because apparently he's still friends with half the family. They tolerated him for years. Part habit, part charm, mostly not wanting a blow-up in front of Ethan. I almost didn't go, but Grace asked. Skipping would look worse, and I was still family to her dad. Victor got there with Ethan. I hadn't seen either of them since the blow-up. Ethan didn't look at me once. Just stayed glued to his dad like I wasn't standing 10 feet away. Victor started drinking early. Beer after beer, laughing too loud, telling stories like he was the star of the show. Grace kept her distance. So did I. It was later in the evening when I heard him. He was in the driveway with two of Grace's uncles, voice raised. "You know what? That marriage was dead years before she met Justin," he said, words slurring. "I was gone half the time anyway. We were just pretending for the kid." He pointed toward the backyard where Ethan was sitting with some cousins. "But she can tell him whatever she wants. I don't care anymore." One uncle asked something I couldn't hear. Victor waved his hand. Yeah, I cheated. Whatever. We were over way before that. She knew it. Everybody knew it. We were just living in the same house, so it didn't blow up sooner. I stood there listening, not moving. Ethan had come up the driveway behind me at some point. I didn't realize until I heard his voice. "Dad," he said, sounding sharp. "What are you talking about?" Victor turned around, eyes glassy. "What?" "I'm telling the truth. Me and your mom were done long before she met him." He jabbed a finger in my direction. "That guy didn't break anything. It was already broken." Ethan looked like someone had smacked him. "You told me—" Victor cut him off. "I told you what you needed to hear. You were a kid. I wasn't going to tell you your parents hated each other for years. Thought it was easier if you blamed somebody else." Ethan didn't say anything. Just stood there staring at his dad. Then he turned and walked back toward the backyard without looking at me. The uncles wandered off too, shaking their heads. Victor lit a cigarette and leaned against his car like he hadn't just blown up the story he'd been telling for 5 years. I didn't say a word to him. Later that night, people were talking. Grace's cousin told me she wasn't surprised. Apparently, most of the family had long suspected Victor was running around on Grace. They just didn't press it. Denial was easier than a public split. By the time the party ended, Ethan was sitting by himself, not talking to anybody. His girlfriend Mia showed up to drive him back to Victor's place. A couple days later, Grace told me Mia broke up with him. Said she found out he'd been telling people I was violent, that I threw him out of the house screaming and threatening him. When she realized none of it was true, she was done. She told him he was just like his dad, Grace said. I didn't feel sorry for him. After the party, things between Grace and Ethan started to shift. At first, she tried to comfort him, telling him Victor was drunk, that maybe he didn't mean it the way it sounded. But then Ethan started snapping at her too. One night, he came by the house while I was packing some stuff to stay at Dante's for a while. Grace asked him to help carry a box to my truck. Not my problem, he said, scrolling on his phone. Grace told him to watch his tone. He rolled his eyes. Whatever. You're just gonna blame me for everything now too. She stared at him. Nobody's blaming you. But you don't talk to me like that. He shrugged and walked out without helping. Over the next week, Ethan barely spoke to her. Victor wasn't around much either. He had some new girlfriend. Spent most of his time at her place. I think that's when Grace started realizing what I already knew. Ethan didn't just hate me. He hated anyone who didn't tell him exactly what he wanted to hear. And Victor's little drunk speech? It didn't just crack the story open. It showed everyone who was actually responsible for what happened. But by then, it was already too late for my marriage. A couple weeks after Victor's little driveway confession, Ethan stopped coming by the house completely. Grace said he was staying with Victor full-time now, though from what I heard, Victor wasn't around much either. He was busy with a new girlfriend. He bounced from Victor's to friends' couches to a cheap off-campus sublet, and by fall he was in a small downtown apartment with 2 roommates. Grace found out about her on social media. Some woman in her early 30s. Pictures of her and Victor at concerts, dinners, weekends out of town. Grace didn't say much when she showed me one of the posts, but I could tell it hit her. Guess he moved on fast, I said. She just closed her phone and walked out of the room. Meanwhile, Ethan started acting different toward her. Before, he'd at least talk to Grace, even if it was mostly about me. Now he barely answered her texts. When she went to Victor's to see him, half the time Ethan wasn't even there. He says he's busy, she told me one night. School, work, friends. I don't know. He barely talks to me anymore. I didn't say anything. One evening, Grace came by the place I was renting. Dante had a friend with a small house he wasn't using, so I'd moved in there after filing the separation papers. Grace stood in the kitchen looking around like she didn't know what to say. Finally, she sat down at the table. I think I messed up, she said. I leaned against the counter. How so? I thought I was protecting Ethan, she said. I thought if I kept the peace with him, things would get better. But now he doesn't even want to be around me. Or his dad. He's just angry all the time. Maybe because the story he believed fell apart, I said. Not my problem anymore. She looked down at her hands. I just didn't want to lose him. I shook my head. And you lost me instead. She didn't argue. Over the next few weeks, I heard things from mutual friends. Ethan was staying with different people, sometimes at Victor's, sometimes at friends' apartments near campus. Victor was always with the new girlfriend, posting pictures like he was 25 again. Grace kept trying to reach Ethan, but he kept his distance. She told me once he snapped at her for asking too many questions, told her to stop bothering him. He's never talked to me like that before, she said quietly. Maybe he thinks everyone owes him something, I said. You let him believe that for a long time. She didn't like hearing that, but it was true. One Sunday afternoon, Dante came by the house I was renting. He brought lunch, sat down across from me, and asked how things were going. I told him about Grace, about Ethan ignoring her, about Victor running around with his new girlfriend like a teenager. Dante shook his head. So the ex is off with someone new? The kid's out doing whatever he wants, and now Grace realizes the only guy who actually stuck around was you. Pretty much, I said. He leaned back in his chair. Don't let her pull you back in, man. She showed you where you stand. Believe her. She said she picked the wrong side, I told him. She did, Dante said. And now she gets to live with it. Doesn't mean you go back to being plan B because the kid and the ex let her down. He was right. I knew he was right. A few days later, Grace stopped by again. She asked if I wanted to come to dinner, just the 2 of us. I told her no. She looked surprised. I thought maybe we could talk. We talked, I said, for months. While you let your son treat me like garbage and believed every word your ex said. I'm not doing it again. She started to say something, then stopped. You want him back, I said. You want your son to forgive you for marrying me. That's what this is about. I just want my family, she said finally. You had one, I told her. You picked Victor's story over mine. You let Ethan run the house like it belonged to him. Now Victor's off with someone new, and Ethan doesn't need you anymore. And you want me to step back in like nothing happened. Grace didn't try to deny it. When she left that night, she didn't say goodbye. Just got in her car and drove off. By the end of summer, everything had changed. Grace was living alone in the house now. Victor had moved in with his new girlfriend. Ethan was still bouncing between friends' places and that cheap off-campus sublet. Grace kept reaching out to both of them, but didn't get much back. She called me a few times too. Sometimes she'd talk about bills or the house. Other times, she'd ask how I was doing, like she was testing the waters. I kept it short. One night, she said, I thought maybe we could meet up. Just talk. About what? I asked. Us, she said. There is no us, Grace, I told her. Not anymore. She didn't say anything for a while, then hung up. That was the last time she called for weeks. Meanwhile, I started getting my life back together. Work was going well. Dante hooked me up with some new clients through his business contacts, and the extra money helped me move into a bigger place. I bought a small house on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. No ghosts attached to it. Dante kept dragging me out on weekends. Golf, cookouts, whatever. That's how I met Isabella. She worked with one of Dante's friends. No kids, never married, had her own place, her own career. First time we talked, it was easy. No drama, no walking on eggshells. We started grabbing coffee after a couple of those group outings. Then dinner. A few weeks later, we were seeing each other regularly. Grace found out when Dante posted a picture of a group dinner on Facebook. Isabella was sitting next to me. We weren't even holding hands or anything, but Grace texted me the next day. "She's pretty," was all she wrote. I didn't reply. By fall, Isabella and I were spending a lot of time together. We went hiking on weekends, tried new restaurants, even took a trip to the coast for a few days. She never asked about Grace or Ethan unless I brought it up, and when I did, she just listened. No judgment, no advice I didn't ask for. Grace, on the other hand, started calling again. First about small things, the house paperwork, a bill that came in my name. Then she asked if we could talk in person. I met her at a diner near the old neighborhood. She looked tired. "Ethan barely talks to me," she said after the waiter left. "Victor's always busy with her. I feel like I don't have anybody anymore." I just nodded. She looked at me for a long time. "Do you ever think about us?" "No," I said. She flinched like I'd slapped her. "You didn't even hesitate. You made your choice," I told her. "I lived in that house for years while your son disrespected me, and your ex spread lies about me. You believed them. Now you want me back because they let you down too?" "No thanks." Tears filled her eyes, but I didn't feel much. Maybe I was too far past it. "I thought you loved me," she said. "I did," I said, "but I love my self-respect more." She didn't argue, just nodded and stared at her coffee. A week later, Dante hosted a big barbecue at his place. Isabella came with me. Couple dozen people there, music playing, kids running around. Dante handed me a beer and nodded toward the gate. Grace was standing there. She looked at the crowd, at Isabella talking to some of the other guests, at me laughing with Dante, and she froze like she wasn't sure if she should even come in. She didn't stay long, just said hi to a few people, kept glancing my way, then left after 20 minutes. Dante smirked. "She didn't like seeing you happy." "Not my problem," I said. 2 weeks later, I heard through a mutual friend that Ethan had dropped out of college for the semester. Grades tanked, apparently. He was working part-time at some warehouse, still living in a small apartment near downtown. Victor didn't want him moving back in. Grace was upset, but didn't know what to do. She thought siding with him would save their relationship, Dante said when I told him. All it did was wreck yours and ruin hers too. He wasn't wrong. By winter, Isabella and I were planning a trip to Mexico. First real vacation I'd taken in years. When Grace found out, probably through Facebook again, she texted me one last time. "I wish things were different," she wrote. I stared at it for a minute, then put my phone down. Didn't reply. The night before the trip, Dante came by with a bottle of champagne. We sat on the back porch while Isabella packed inside. "You did the right thing," Dante said. "Yeah," I said. "Feels like it." "Grace made her choice," he said. "Victor made his. The kid made his. Now you get to make yours. Don't look back." I didn't plan to. When we left for the airport the next morning, I felt lighter than I had in years. Grace had her empty house. Victor had his new girlfriend. Ethan had his pride and nothing else. And me? I had a fresh start. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way.